Now this is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine.
There was this cabbie named Marty who worked the graveyard shift. Now one time, it was near the end of his run. He was getting ready to call it a night. But just then, a guy came out of a restaurant and flagged him down. Marty was off duty, but he figured that he might as well pick up this one last fare, seeing that business had been slow and all. The guy got into the back and gave him an address on the outskirts of town. Not an actual street number, just an intersection. Even though it was a good fare, Marty instantly regretted picking this guy up. Something just didn't feel right. The guy was unshaven and looked like he'd been wearing the same jacket for days. Plus, he had kind of a weird smell. Marty couldn't put his finger on what it was, something like peanuts. But it wasn't exactly pleasant. So Marty got to driving. There wasn't any traffic, but the going was pretty slow. The fog that night was thicker than pea soup. He turned down the concession road where he was supposed to drop the guy off. The road looked like it hadn't been driven on in years. The weeds were overgrown on both sides and the gravel was loose and slippery. Marty couldn't wait to get rid of this guy and go home, so he was driving a little faster than he should have been going. Then something, a shape, jumped out of the mist in front of the car. Marty slammed on the brakes. Last thing he wanted at this time of night was a squirt of skunk juice. He missed the animal, went into a skid, off the road, coming to a stop in the ditch. "This'll be fine," said the guy in the back, as he tossed Marty a 10 and hopped out the door. Marty couldn't believe it. He jumped out of the cab only to see the guy disappear into the fog. He looked at his poor cab and scratched his head. Looked like he'd have to radio for a tow. So much for that extra money he just made, and a good night's sleep. He sat back into the cab and twiddled with the radio. Bad news. It had been working fine before, but the tumble into the ditch must have knocked it out. He was stranded. Great. He looked out into the mist. No lights, nothing for miles but fog and night. Marty turned his attention to the busted radio. Amateur electrician time, he sighed, prying open the casing with an old screwdriver. But inside, the radio was a jumbled spaghetti of wires and tubes. A dull headache throbbed behind his eyes. This was going to be a long night. When the car suddenly shuddered, Marty snapped his head around. Behind him loomed a gigantic ink-black shadow. The car shuddered again. Panicked, he tried to start the car. The keys jangled out of his shaking fingers. He had one chance before the thing could get him, he figured. Mind racing, he decided to bolt. But just as he got the door open, the car shuddered again, knocking him out into the mud. Then, somehow, with otherworldly power behind it, the car surged onto the road, undercarriage scraping gravel. For the first time, Marty saw the true enormity of the thing. It seemed to black out the whole sky. Could it possibly be his fare? Some sort of shape-shifting monster come to claim its next victim? Marty scrambled up, shaking, feeling the hot breath of it behind him when something tapped his shoulder. Marty froze. Slowly, trembling, he began to turn around. A scream caught in Marty's throat. "What's the matter? Ain't you never seen an elephant before?" Marty's heart stopped as a huge form emerged from the ditch, trunk outstretched, reaching for him and plopping 4 tickets into his hand. "We open Sunday, and bring the kids, 'cause everybody loves the circus." And off the two of them went, silhouetted in Marty's headlight beams. Princess, 2 tons of circus royalty, and her affable but somewhat smelly trainer. Hey, it's a true story. It really happened. And Marty thanked his lucky stars that he picked up the right guy. I mean, what if it had been the snake charmer?
All right, go!